Before we go over this article from Mike Williams, reviews editor at usgamer.net. By the way, great job with this article and interview, Mike. Shout out to Sudan as well as Hassan for sending this my way via Twitter and our awesome Discord community. So Mike goes over some information that you may want to know regarding Mafia Definitive Edition. By the way, this article, linked below in the description section. It's definitely worth a click and a read if you want to. All right, so here we go. Inside the Mafia Definitive Edition remake, how Hangar 13 is rebuilding it from the ground up. Hangar 13 looks to the past of Mafia series as it builds towards its future. Once again, by Mike Williams. Let's see, quote, many young men started down a false path to their true destiny. Time and fortune usually set them all right. That quote is from Mario Puzo's The Godfather, the 1969 book that adapted into Francis Ford Coppola's 1972 film of the same name. The Godfather is a cornerstone of pop culture. Many films involving gangsters were made prior, but none had the same impact. The Godfather led to films like Goodfellas and television shows like The Sopranos. For better or worse, it has defined the Italian culture for nearly 50 years. The first Mafia game, developed by Illusion, then 2K Czech, now Hangar 13, was one of the many works inspired by The Godfather's long shadow. It was well loved by critics and enjoyed a solid but fervent community, including myself. But it was also an open-world game that came out a year after Grand Theft Auto 3. This is very true. A game that tore up records and gathered accolades by the dozen. By contrast, Mafia was only a modest success, and it was hamstrung by poor PlayStation 2 and Xbox console ports. Yeah, the ports for Mafia were very bad. I mean, you definitely wanted to have a PC version of that game. It was fantastic on PC. Still is. But the port versions, PS2, original Xbox, weren't so much. While GTA 3 was all about the wild action and fun, Mafia tried to immerse the player in the world of Tommy Angelo. A cab driver turned mafioso, cars handled closer to the real 1920s model available in the time period and featured semi-realistic damage models. Police would book players on small offenses like speeding or running red lights. Mafia was a slow burn, a game that wanted you to consider your actions within the context of the fictional city of Lost Heaven. Not everyone wanted that kind of open world experience, but if you did, there was little like it. Now the original Mafia is getting a new lease on life and a chance to find a new audience. As part of the Mafia trilogy, players can experience 3 different tales of organized crime. Mafia 3, developed by Hangar 13, has cleaned up its 2016 release along with the remaster of Mafia 2, but Mafia Definitive Edition is the center stage of the trilogy and a star, as well as a chance for players to see what they've missed and for veterans to revisit the streets of Lost Heaven. The concept for what would be Mafia Definitive Edition came a few months after Hangar 13 had finished work on Mafia 3's DLC. The idea that the Definitive Edition came up probably about 6 months after we wrapped Mafia 3, maybe a little bit longer than that, quote-unquote, explains Hangar 13 President and Chief Creative Officer Haden Blackman. Quote, it was probably 3 months after our last DLC was done, and we started talking about it in earnest, but it was really a small team for a long time. It's only been in the last year and a half that we've really been working on it with a full production team because we wanted to make sure that we had everything laid out correctly. According to Blackman, a small team within Hangar 13 comprised of some developers behind the original game pitched the idea to management. The concept was simple. Take everything that the team had learned from the development of Mafia 3, including the studio's engine, and use it to remake Lost Heaven from the ground up. Blackman and the rest of Hangar 13 realized that the original Mafia had its hardcore fans, like me, and many others, and they factored heavily into how they approached the remake. Well, thank you, Haden and Hangar 13. I do appreciate that on behalf of original Mafia City of Lost Heaven fans. Quote unquote, it's always difficult when you're looking at a game that is 18 years old and you want to see if there's ways we can actually remake this that is both true to the original game and that spirit, but take advantage of everything from technology to gameplay to storytelling, says Blackman. We took a hard look at it and said, can we do it justice? Can we make sure that it lives up to more modern expectations? Part of capturing that spirit is the acknowledgement that the original Mafia is a very linear narrative-based game in the market that tends to offer different kinds of open-world experiences. For that remake, the studio was going to change Mafia, but the question was, what would be changed? They looked at the story, cinematics, mechanics, and even the city itself, deciding what to bring forward in its original form and what to change. Blackman points to the cinematics, which seems quaint in an industry that has learned so much from the film over the years. Quote, "It's interesting because we were working on Mafia 3. We had a couple different filmic references. One was Goodfellas, but in the second half of Goodfellas, right? The first half is a bit more that good Godfather vein, he tells me. Let's see, our first impression that Mafia Definitive Edition cinematics was going back to the original. See, Thomas, who was the original media director who worked on the original, so he's directed all the cinematics from the cinematography and pacing standpoint. The Godfather and Godfather Part 2 factor into influences of Mafia Definitive Edition, but Hangar 13 also looked to works from eras that the game takes place in. Quote, "We look at so much of the specific film, not just the general films, but the time period that looked to fill the films that were actually shot in the 20s and 30s, said Blackman, especially the 30s during Prohibition. Photographs, music from that time period, all that gone into the mix as we define the tone, feel, and atmosphere." When Mafia 3 launched in 2016, it wasn't well received on a technical level, but it was praised for the tale of Lincoln Clay, a black Vietnam veteran turned mobster. For Hangar 13, looking at the story of Tommy Angelo, the rising star of the Salieri crime family, was an opportunity to flesh out his journey. Tommy's journey is already on a strong one in the original Mafia, but there was room to expand the stories of his friends and family, like Tommy's girlfriend Sarah. Quote, "For example, Sarah is the love interest in the original. She doesn't get very much screen time, this is very true, but she's the heart of why Tommy Angelo is doing what he's doing," says Blackman. "At the beginning of the game, you learn he's trying to arrange a way out for the life, and he's doing it all for his family. So we wanted to make sure that as a player, you knew what it was that he was trying to protect. We wanted to make sure that Sarah got more screen time, she's in the game more, has an understandable kind of role in the lowercase family and uppercase family." So like Tommy's family and then, of course, the Salieri family. I think that's the comparison there, the two different families. In Mafia Definitive Edition, Sarah is in a position of having a working part in her father Luigi's bar for a long time. She's not part of the mob, but she has an idea of how it operates. For Tommy, she becomes a sounding board for the problems of a made man, as opposed to the more passive character she was before. Blackman also points to Polly and Sam, two of Tommy's compatriots, as characters who find their roles expanded a bit. So I do applaud Hangar 13 and Haden Blackman and everyone else for expanding their roles, because I do feel like we needed more time with Sarah, Polly, as well as Sam in the original Mafia game. Mafia Definitive Edition also does more to root the player in the ongoing war between the Salieri and Morello crime families. Tommy Angelo is a member of the Salieri crime family, who is definitely the underdog in the war, so the missions have been tweaked, changed, and added to really sell the players on the stakes of the conflict. Quote, "We took a hard look at each mission and looked at whether or not we could add additional set pieces," said Blackman. "If there was additional content we could put into these missions to flesh them out a little bit, or add a couple more memorable moments to each without sacrificing the core narrative and the beats or the intent of the mission of the story overall." Blackman admits that one of the valid criticisms of Mafia 3 is the side missions can become repetitive over time. Yeah, just a little. To take down each of the rackets in Lincoln Clay's New Bordeaux, you had to perform the same actions again and again. For Mafia Definitive Edition, this was a particular focus for the team, adding new meaningful missions without too much repetition. Quote, "Almost all of our emphasis was on the missions for Mafia Definitive Edition, which again is the script of the original name. Lost Heaven itself has also seen a drastic rethink, as it's one of the places where Hangar 13 could play about losing what made the original Mafia work. For Mafia 3, a lot of the studio's interactive work was on determining the right size of the city streets, where important landmarks were located. The remake for Lincoln's New Bordeaux was to make sure that the players had something interesting to look at if they turned 60 degrees. Those concepts carried forward in the new version of Lost Heaven. Likewise, Mafia 3 nailed the diversity of its city districts, something Blackman says the team drew from the original Mafia that's fed back into Mafia Definitive Edition. Quote, "The art team has been really amazing at trying to produce the most beautiful city that they could," he adds. "Driving safe. Part of the hook of Mafia is stewing in the world of Lost Heaven. Outside the specific events, the player as Tommy is trying their best to stay out of trouble. You want to stay off the police's radar because Tommy isn't a soldier. He won't survive too much punishment. Likewise, too many bumps and crashes would find your assortment of cars breaking down, or in some cases exploding. Mafia Definitive Edition wants to straddle the line between original and Mafia 3 by offering a host of options. In addition to basic difficulty options, Mafia Definitive Edition includes settings for police presence and how they treat infractions. If you want to play Definitive Edition like the original, you can, but it also opens the doors for players that just want to experience the story of Tommy Angelo. Mafia 3 was designed to evoke the feel of the 1960s crime drama, while Mafia Remake harkens back to an earlier time. Quote, with Mafia, we're leaning back into the time period. It's set during the 30s, so it's a little bit more iconic. It's a slower pace. That's not to say that there's not high-octane moments, and there's not, big set pieces, but in general, it has a different tone and a different vibe because of the inspiration we're taking from the time period. One major change is gunplay being pulled from Mafia 3, with more cover-based gunplay mechanics. That's something a lot of us original Mafia fans are definitely going to appreciate. One of the flaws from the original game. The difference is Clay was a former soldier. Tommy is just a cab driver. Hangar 13 tried to capture the difference between the two men in the gameplay. Combat is a bit more lethal for Tommy, and every bullet matters. Mafia is about grounding the player in those encounters rather than going in guns blazing. So this is something I'm really happy to see. Is a lot of people were afraid that Tommy Angelo was just going to be a copy-paste of Lincoln Clay, and that's not the case. Obviously, Lincoln Clay was a badass special ops Vietnam veteran. Like, as pointed out, Tommy Angelo is just a cab driver turned mafioso. He's not going to have the same skills as Lincoln Clay, but eventually, he becomes a badass in his own right. Quote, the original was a challenging game, and that's what's part of the appeal. Yeah, it definitely was challenging. So we're trying to walk the line with normal difficulty mode to make sure that its feel still is like the compelling experience for those that remember the original, but doesn't alienate new fans and players. We're trying to solve that by providing you with control over a number of different options. Alongside the difficulty options mentioned before, Mafia Definitive Edition will feature 2 options for its driving mechanics. There'll be a full-fat simulation driving mode, just like in the original, and the accessible driving mode for those that aren't as hardcore. This split option was available in Mafia 3, and Hangar 13 has brought it back and improved upon it for the remake. There's also the addition of motorcycles as a new vehicle option that wasn't present in the original game. And I'm very curious to see how well that the motorcycles will function in Mafia Definitive Edition. And like so many others, I really wish we had a motorcycle for Lincoln Clay in Mafia 3. I'm just saying. One feature that's not making the transition is Mafia 3's neighboring policing. To reflect the racism of the time, the police would respond to crime slower in poor, mostly black districts, as opposed to their quick responses in richer white neighborhoods. Blackman says that this system is not being translated over to Mafia Definitive Edition because Blackman says he feels it doesn't fit with the story being told. One of the things that I got really proud about Mafia 3 was the fact that we were able to take that kind of gameplay and narrative and marry them in that way, he says. With Mafia Definitive Edition, because of the nature of the story, the setting, and who the character is, that particular system didn't seem relevant. While that one system didn't make the transition because it just didn't translate into the story of the time period, a number of others, like simulation mode of driving, did. Mafia Definitive Edition is the primary focus for the team at Hangar 13, but it's just as Mafia 3's improvements rolled into the Definitive Edition that changes made for the game are rolling right into what's coming for next-gen consoles like PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Quote, we're actually a multi-project studio, says Blackman. Everything we do at Hangar 13 is meant to be shared across projects. The lighting in Mafia 3 we thought was really good, but at the end of the day, it felt like it maybe wasn't good enough. So we went in and we redid our lighting model for Mafia Definitive Edition. That's how our tech has been added to our engine, and that will carry over into the next game that we do, the game that we're looking out on now. So one thing I really hope is that they improve the skybox. So yes, the Mafia 3 skybox, I haven't seen the Definitive Edition version of Mafia 3 skybox. Maybe it's better. If you have played Mafia 3 Definitive Edition, I know it's off topic, but let me know. Is the skybox any better? Let's see, a remake of Mafia represented an opportunity for Hangar 13. Most of the things the studio would do in pre-production on a new title, including the story, characters, and mission flow, were already solved. Blackman says the team was already about to start making assets for Mafia Definitive Edition on day one because of this. It also represented a great project to train new hires on Hangar 13's tools and technology. They'll be able to build on the next project well educated on how to build content. Because of where Mafia 3 was at, it was always a little bit ahead of one of our other titles, So they spearhead a lot of our production philosophies as well. We revamped the way they do milestones from a tech standpoint. There's a number of things, including the lighting model. They're carrying that over. And now its tech's been added to our engine and now will carry over to the next game that we do. The game that we're working on now. When Mike asked about the challenges of Mafia Definitive Edition the team has seen, Blackman says most of the issues are simply those that pop up during the development of any game. The unique challenges are also the ones that have affected other studios, such as the bug, which forced the studio to transition from work to home deep into production. Blackman says that the team's pivot was, quote-unquote, amazing, and in under 48 hours, we had everybody up and working. Well, that's awesome. The biggest worry and challenge is simply how fans will react to Mafia Definitive Edition. Hangar 13 is starting off on the wrong foot with reviews of the definitive editions of Mafia 2 and 3 being mixed, with users reporting physics bugs, texture problems, stuttering, and other issues. Patches for both games were released last week, but does cast a shadow over the upcoming release of the remake. Despite that, the team at Hangar 13 is doing its best to make sure that Mafia Definitive Edition is the perfect addition to a beloved classic. Quote, "That's the thing that keeps me up at night the most. Will fans appreciate what we've done and try to make sure that the challenge tone and the pace of the original was preserved? But new fans will be able to come in and still enjoy it. I think that's a really hard balance to strike," admits Blackman. Mafia Definitive Edition is coming to Steam, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, August 28th, 2020. Perhaps this time, without the looming force of GTA, Mafia will be set on the right path to further success and another sequel. And I believe that this is definitely Hangar 13's chance for redemption. And maybe it's not really redemption, because I always felt like Mafia 3 was pushed by the publisher to get out by the October 2016 holiday window. I honestly believe that. Nothing to confirm it, but it just seems to be the case. I think that Haden Blackman and the team behind Hangar 13 have learned a lot from Mafia 3, the pros and the cons, the issues that arose. And I think that Mafia Definitive Edition is going to be an awesome experience. I know that there's some people out there concerned about Mafia Definitive Edition while we patiently await for a gameplay trailer. But I feel like that once we do, it's going to excite us even more about Mafia Definitive Edition whenever it comes out in August 28th, 2020. As a Mafia fan, I am choosing to have faith in Hangar 13. I believe they've learned a lot from Mafia 3, and it's coming over into Mafia Definitive Edition. And I think that it's going to be a great game. I know some people are like, well, why is it only $40 if it's going to be great? Well, you know, there's fantastic games that sell for $20 and there's shit games that sell for $60. Price tag is not the issue here. It's the quality. So I believe that Mafia Definitive Edition is going to be a worthy remake to Mafia City of Lost Heaven, but we'll just have to wait and see in late August. I'm definitely going to stream it start to finish, and of course, I will review it. And if I love it, if I think it's great, then I'll tell you that in my review. If it's not, then I'll be honest with you. Anyways, good article, Mike. Well done, sir. And his article is linked below in the description section. Give it a click. Go read it for yourself if you get a chance. And your thoughts, your views, opinions regarding the information that we went over today for Mafia Definitive Edition by the interview with Haden Blackman. Awesome. I'm glad that there's going to be the return of the police and the option to disable that if you want, as well as fleshing out characters like Sarah, Polly, as well as Sam. I think that's definitely a good move on Hangar 13's part. But your thoughts, your views, and opinions regarding the information we went over today, welcome below in the comments section.